My name is Tiago Almeida. I was born and raised in São Martinho do Val, a little community in northern Portugal. Land of soft hills, antique stones, and people who still look at you. Everyone here knows each other for better or worse. My worst reputation has persisted for years. Before I tell you what occurred to me, I must recall the day everything changed. September was oppressive, with cicadas louder than the church bell. Ground was dry, sky was cloudless, and heat stuck to skin like torture. Today was Notre Dame de Douleurs' most solemn procession. Naturally, I knew. It was unknown to whom? I witnessed my mother prepare everything ahead of time since childhood. Black dress, lace veil, large blue ribbon candle. She got up before dawn, put incense in a corner of the living room, and claimed the Virgin was coming and we needed a pure soul. However, I no longer believed it. Very angry. Angry with unfulfilled promises, unanswered prayers, and a distant God. I was probably most angry at my own pain, which I feigned not to feel. My disbelief and venom got mocked over time. At the end of the afternoon, the sun was goldening the roofs in burnt soil and the streets smelled of incense. The village had embroidered linens on the windows, red-eyed skins on the balconies, and a peacefulness that annoyed me. Hypocrisy, I thought, spitting on the sidewalk. I had 2 gorges and a little bottle of fine wine in my jacket pocket, which gave me courage. In front of the church, people gathered. Black women with white hair coverings cried silently. Men with serious faces wiped benches with moist cloths. Children lined up with paper angels, and suddenly she appeared. Notre Dame de Douleurs, tall, tranquil, with a sorrowful and sweet face, clothed in a navy blue coat embroidered with gold threads. A sword crossed her heart on her chest, symbolizing her 7 motherly pangs. She was carried on a stretcher by 4 men walking slowly. I could hear the candles crackling in the profound calm, and standing at the sidewalk edge, something in me was boiling. This vision, this naive devotion, these tears. All this seemed like a well-orchestrated falsehood. I drank another gorgée, breathed, and laughed loudly, intentionally, and to pain. Some women frowned at me, others lowered their heads. But I continued. Instead, I took 2 steps and my life collapsed. I couldn't articulate my thoughts at that moment. Possibly collected rage. Maybe the booze was searing my gut. Perhaps he was proud of his ability to defy the skies. I only know that Notre Dame de Douleurs, this brancard surrounded by white flowers and blue sails drifting in the breeze, did not appear holy to me. I saw timber. Saw paint. The staging was seen. Old women in the community murmured. A few made the cross. Others pulled away like they were waiting for lightning to hit me. But I didn't care. At that time I wanted to shock. I wanted everyone to know I wasn't terrified of the saint, God, or anyone. I stopped before the brancard. I felt candle heat everywhere. The fragrance of incense made me queasy. Without thinking, I raised my knee and kicked the picture with ferocity, disgust, and all my might. Dry sound. Image flickered. It plummeted in a ruckus that seemed to shake the ground. Flowers dispersed. A candle fell over. The Virgin's chest-crossing sword snapped in 2. 1 second of silence. Heavy quiet. An alien quiet. I heard the first wail. I think Dona Lourdes knelt, sobbing. Without knowing what to say, the priest approached. The kids cried. Men wearing brancards stared at me like they saw no devil. I stood there, smiling like I had won a battle. Do you hear her painlessness? Just a statue, I shouted. My body shook at that very instant. First, a cold shudder ran up my spine like I had fallen into a frozen river. A peculiar leg feeling followed. A weight. Swelling. Like I no longer owned it. I sought retreat. I tried to move. But nothing. Knees bowed. I fell. There. Before everyone. Center of procession. People disengaged. They stared at me like something unseen hit me. That may be so. Despite my efforts, I couldn't stand. Get up, Tiago. Quit your circus. Some shouted. I wasn't fake. That wasn't theater. My legs fonnesit. I felt nothing below my knees. No pain. No tingle. Nothing. Shame seized me. Fear paralyzed me. I believed I was going to die right there. My mother ran. She knelt beside me, wailing like I had never seen her. My boy. You did what? Sacred Virgin. Forgive him. Not sure what he's doing. The locals carted me home. They placed me in bed. I stayed there. Without walking. Not understanding. Without realizing it was just the start. The first 3 days I didn't speak. I lay on this wooden bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to my mother's footsteps in the house and chanting her rosary as if to force God into the walls. The lavender smell, grains falling between her fingers, and flickering lamplight in the darkness made me queasy. But my legs' silence stung me most. They existed. I saw them. I could touch them. I felt nothing. They appeared dead. It was as if someone had pulled their soul out and left the package. Village doctors came. One needle stung me. Applied ice again. Another brought herbs. They asked inquiries, glanced, and left shaking their heads. Psychological. A traumatic. Stress. Perhaps it will pass. Maybe not. My mother, sitting by the bed, said nothing. She cried silently with the rosary in her hands and red eyes from over-praying. Outside, the village murmured. Food was left at the door by the old ladies. Our window was avoided by kids. I didn't believe it. Couldn't happen to me. I mocked everyone's faith. I was the one who chuckled at the processions. I was now a prisoner of myself. A punishment that consumed me from the inside out, yet was invisible to others. That same day, the picture of the Virgin I had hit was taken up. I found out that the priest and others of the faithful had cleaned the brancard, glued the parts of the broken sword, reattached the flowers, and applied rose oil to the statue during the night. An elderly woman with shaky hands had restored her, claiming that a dream with the saint had healed her from the knee. Miracle, he said. Furthermore, the name that the public was using was not the Virgin's. I owned it. Tiago was held accountable for his actions. He was touched by the Virgin. The person who resisted her fell. I listened to everything in my room through the open window. Even worse was the fact that I started to believe it. The nights grew longer. I didn't get any sleep. I heard sounds that I couldn't identify. Doors, footsteps, and faint voices calling my name. I felt something on my chest one evening. A presence, a warmth, a weight. I opened my eyes. I had a racing heart. My mother was at the foot of the bed, kneeling with her face to the floor and pleading for my pardon. Don't take my son, Holy Virgin, but take me. He is frail. He's lost his way. However, I'm sure you can locate him. I implore you. Something broke inside of me at that very instant. Something I'd been hiding for years. Anger, pride, and conceit. And I started crying for the first time. I haven't prayed yet, though. I haven't made any requests yet, because I secretly believed that I was undeserving of anything. No reprieve, no healing, no forgiveness. I was left with nothing but stillness and the worry that this punishment would never end. It had been 2 weeks. 2 weeks where the nights appeared to go on forever, and the days dragged on like shadows. I had no idea what time it was. The stench of burnt wax persisted even after my mother gently turned off the lamps. On the platter the bread rotted. The house was quiet. The bells calling to mass in the distance. I was crushed by all of this. My legs were still dead. I was already abandoned by the doctors. I had to. Something that I couldn't see or touch now crushed me, even though I always believed that I was greater than any belief. Even worse, I continued to refuse to beg for forgiveness. My mouth seemed to be stitched shut from the inside, restrained by pride. My mother came into the room with a determination in her eyes on that chilly, overcast afternoon. We have a church appointment. For what purpose? Despite the temptation, I want to take you there. I refuse to go. You have no other option. My son is you. I continue to believe in miracles. She went to ask for the cart from her neighbor. With the assistance of Mr. Joachim, she placed a large blanket that was bound with ropes on a flower bed. As though I were a newborn or an infirm. I therefore went back to this church which I had always avoided, for the first time in years. The trip was brief but never-ending. In the street, people paused to observe. A few made the cross sign. Others muttered. And I felt smaller than ever, as though pride was the only thing left in me. My mother grasped my hand as the cart came to a stop in front of the church gate. She had a frozen hand, as well as mine. You don't even have to talk, she said. At the door the priest emerged. His eyes were hollowed out and his face was calm. He was dressed in a dark suit. He remained silent. All he did was bend his head. Under the shade of a stained glass window that filtered the light in a blue and golden tone, Two young men from the community carefully hoisted me up and seated me on the last bench of the side nave. The church was deserted. There was only silence, a heavy odor of ancient wood and lit candles. This specific stillness embraces rather than crushes. Then I saw it, the restored, whole and exquisite image of Notre Dame de Douleurs. On the side altar she was there, her eyes as gentle and sorrowful as ever. However, there was more, something I was unable to describe. As though she still felt compassion for me in spite of everything I had done. I had a numb throat. My palms started to perspire. Even without feeling my legs, I wanted to run. However, I stayed. I continued to stare at her. Time paused. Something inside of me broke in the silence as the candle flickered next to me. I could feel the tears streaming down my face. I am broken from the inside out, like an old house slowly falling apart, since I ridiculed myself so much and scoffed at other people's faith. Pardon me, I whispered. I'm not even sure if what I uttered came from my heart or my words. However, I swear on everything I own. I felt a tingling sensation in my toes at that same instant. It was brief, light, but genuine. I opened my eyes. I shifted my toes. They answered. I nearly toppled over the bench. My mom rushed over to me. What is it? I sensed it. What? My feet. My feet. I sensed them. She collapsed on the ground. She let out a childlike cry. For the first time I realized that perhaps, just possibly, the Virgin was listening to me, but all I could do was gaze at her image without comprehending anything. I didn't sleep that night. I lay there with my eyes wide open, focusing my room ceiling as though it were the entire sky. With the rosary still in her fingers, my mother had dozed out on the chair by the bed. The candle was already extinguished. The only lingering scent was that of melted wax. However, something new emerged within me. I could feel my feet. Yes, there was a tiny discharge. There was another one, though. Then one more. My legs were tickling up and down, like they were waking up from a bad dream. I was unsure of how to handle all of this. I wasn't sure if I should be happy, cry, or keep quiet. To tell the truth, I was scared deep inside. I was afraid this was all a dream, fearful of believing just to revert to the emptiness of the past. However, I muttered, "Mom, I want to go back to church." As soon as the sun came up and my mother woke up, she gave me a look that suggested she didn't comprehend. Then she broke down in tears and went to her knees. Once more. We used a wheelchair this time, but I went there with an open mind. With just the priest setting up the altar and an elderly woman scrubbing the pews, the church was nearly deserted. The image of the Virgin was waiting for me in the exact spot where the stained glass was splattering colors on the floor. This time I requested that you come up front, up close. I remained there while my mother lit a candle, gazing at this calm and dejected face and realizing for the first time in my life that it was more than simply a picture. It was there. It was affection. It was pardon. Once more I shed tears, but I didn't cover them up. I kept my eyes on it. I started talking there, in front of her. You were outraged by me. You were embarrassed by me. And yet there you are, entire and calm. My voice faltered. And then I confessed like a naked person before God. I was upset with you. Because when I was a young child, my faith was violated. Because even though I prayed for my father when he was ill, he passed away. Because I was raised on promises that were never fulfilled. I shut myself off as a result. I didn't hear a voice then. There was no light visible to me. However, something within me broke loose. At that moment I could definitely feel the heat building up in my legs. I shut my eyes. I took a deep breath. I firmly, slowly, and with effort stood up by pressing my hands against the armchairs. With a smothered cry, my mother turned around. The priest took off running. The housekeeper collapsed to her knees. And I remained standing there. I remained silent. I refrained from crying. I refrained from screaming. After glancing at the picture of the Virgin, I muttered, "Thank you." My initial steps were brief. One by one. However, I sensed that something was moving with each movement. As though forgiveness gave me fresh muscles, new bones, and a new spirit. I walked slowly but steadily home. The news swept across the village like a storm of dust. Tiago has resumed walking. He was healed by the Virgin. It's a miracle. I didn't deny it either. However, I also didn't feel proud of it. Because I was aware of it now. Without humility, there can be no miracle. My life became a whisper between the village walls in the days that followed. I was regarded as though I had risen from the grave. The women from the house paused on the street and gave a quiet description of me. As though I were a saint, some even came up to me to ask for prayers. However, I wasn't. I was completely aware of who I was. I was a man who was forgiven, and I already deserved a lot more than that. Every night my mother, whose eyes were constantly moist, lit a candle in front of the house's tiny hotel. "Thank you," she whispered. "My saint. I am grateful that you did not desert my son." And I silently listened to her. Gratitude was something new that made my heart constrict. A thankfulness that weighs, that demands an explanation, that keeps me from living my life the way I used to. Nor after feeling my legs dead and finding them, nor after kicking the Mother of Heaven and being greeted by her tenderly in spite of everything, could I pretend that nothing had happened. I walked back to the church on the first Sunday. When they saw me come in, they stood up. Some gave me respectful, gentle applause, but what really got my attention was the priest's covert tears at the altar. I took a seat on the final bench. I remained silent. I simply listened, allowing each word of the gospel to settle in me like a seed in a muddy soil. I stood up after the last benediction. I went to the side altar, where Our Lady of Sorrow's restored image was situated. Without hurrying, I crouched down and remained there, smelling the flowers and feeling the light from the stained glass brush across my face. Then I made a straightforward but profound pledge. I would never again disparage anyone's beliefs, and if I had the chance, I would mention you to others in need, to those who, like me, had become heartless due to the suffering. I started to alter over the next few days, first on the inside and then on the outside. I assisted the priest in fixing the wall of the church. I delivered bags of flour to a widow's home. The school door was slamming with the wind, so I fixed it. According to some, the miracle changed her. In actuality, however, the miracle was just the start. I choose the rest. I discovered a young man sitting on the field's edge one morning, blind. The person hanging about with terrible habits was the priest's son. I took a seat beside him. From the start, I told him everything, the kick, the shame, the miracle, without holding anything back. He silently listened to me. "I thought that faith was just an old thing," he stated at the end. I said, "Me too," till my spirit finally cooled down and she was the only person left. I prayed with someone else for the first time there, in the morning light. I prayed quietly, simply, and from the bottom of my heart. And I learned that genuine appreciation acts rather than cries. My pledge was followed by events that were like a river that eventually broke the dam. I used to feel burdened by faith, but now it was the stream that took me far away from the guy I had once been. However, my steps remained unclear even if my soul was at peace. Even after all of this had stopped, there were still days when my body shook and nights when fear returned to whisper. According to my mother, it was only a question about the miracle. The feet tremble when one doubts the blessing, and the eyes are filled with faith, she added. I so agreed to the priest's request. Tiago. A solemn mass honoring Notre Dame de Dolores will be held on Sunday. Everyone in the village will be present. What would I do in the midst of so many people, I asked myself. You simply must be present, he said. Leave the rest to God. The weight of all the looks came with Sunday. There were youngsters on their knees, elderly folks on their knees, and individuals sitting on the steps of the crowded church. As though summoning the stones to rejoice, the bell rung. And there she was, surrounded by incense, gentle chants, and white flowers. As though to say, I remember you and I still wait for you. The image of the Virgin, with her blue garment and her melancholy face, is welcome. As a precaution, they carried me to the door on the shoulders of two village guys. However, I must confess that I still had some doubts. I remained there, resting on a wooden cane at the base of the church. I was distracted by the stained glass windows, the lit candles, and the kneeling faithful as I walked in. I felt small once more. But this time it was out of humility rather than pride. The feeling you get when you realize you were loved even though you didn't deserve it. The chalice was hoisted by the priest at the consecration. The assembly was plunged into complete silence. Its silhouette was cut by the stained glass's light, giving the impression that the entire sky was present. The feeling of my legs being sturdy came at this exact instant. I firmly tightened the cane, pressed my right foot first, then my left, and slowly but fearlessly stood up. One step led to another and still another. People started to turn around. A woman put her hand to her lips. One man went down on his knees. The priest then hurried down the stairs after setting the chalice on the altar. With tears in my eyes, I said, "I'm here, Tiago, Father." Completely. The church erupted in singing and cheers. A few exclaimed miracle. Others just silently sobbed. And all I did was stare at her. Without assistance, I knelt down. I pressed my forehead against the chilly church floor and expressed my gratitude. There was general grace throughout the remainder of the Massachusetts. The priest dedicated his homily to mercy, his voice quivering. According to him, God sometimes permits us to be broken, not so that we can destroy ourselves, but so that we can lovingly reconstruct ourselves. I was asked to speak at the celebration's conclusion. I walked slowly but confidently up to the altar. My hands were shaking when I reached for the microphone, and I only made one statement. I gave her image a boost, and she gave me a lift. I didn't have to continue. Everyone in the village understood. Nothing was ever the same after that day. The doors that had previously closed in my face due to embarrassment, fear, or disdain started to open. And with a strange stillness, not tapping. A hopeful silence. Silence like this which only those who have been harmed can comprehend. People approached me. Young folks, elderly people, men with shaky hands and women with weary eyes. Everyone was eager to hear my story. It was because of a thirst I recognized, not out of curiosity, because I had once been exhausted from the inside out. Then, without thinking, I started talking. Initially, during a youth gathering at the parish. Then in a little home, an elderly woman begged me to talk to her grandson, who was doing narcotics. Next in a school. In a different village too. It seemed like something fresh was mending me every time I recounted a story. I didn't make anything up. Nude, I told the truth. That in my rage I kicked the icon of the Virgin. I blasphemously insulted everyone. I was immobilized. And that it wasn't until I was able to kneel and beg for forgiveness that I was cured. That was all. Easy. However, it was sufficient. A young man seated at the rear of the church stood up one day and said, "I lost my father too." I was furious too. I also discarded all of my beliefs. Then he crouched down and began again, his eyes watering. Following my testimony, I witnessed marriages being reconstructed. I witnessed young people putting aside their pride and returning to prayer. I noticed mothers grinning once more. And I seen men sobbing without embarrassment. The hardest part, though, was having to testify while incarcerated. I had received an invitation from the chaplain to address the inmates of a local institution. "There are a lot of Tiagos in there, my son," he remarked. "Men who can still be fixed despite having internal brokenness." I was slow to accept. The fear came back. The past was a burden. However, I went there. About 20 men sat with their eyes closed and their arms crossed in a cramped, stuffy room. I started talking. I was conceited. I considered other people's faith to be a sign of weakness. But one day, literally, my legs gave out. And I didn't start to get back up until I had fallen for good. No one cheered at the conclusion, but one of them approached me. His eyes were crimson, and his face was etched with the signs of life. "I once broke a statue of my grandma, but I've never mentioned it to anyone. That was the day she passed away. I broke everything and yelled at God. I haven't prayed since that day." After a brief period of silence, he said, "But I might give it another go today." I realized then that this was not a mission for fame or the stage. It was a seed-planting mission. I will share a little bit of my story wherever I go to let others realize that the miracle wasn't simply about being able to walk again, but also about being able to believe again. I initially believed that my goal was to simply share the miracle, share my experience, bear testimony to my suffering, and then go on. However, as time passed, I came to understand that the miracle did not restore my identity. I became a different person as a result of its healing. I started my theological studies with this idea in mind. I did, after all, make fun of processions, laugh at rosaries, and strike a sacred figure in front of the entire community. In the nights, I now read the Psalms, the Gospels, the works of the saints, and the words of the Virgin Mary in her global apparitions. Each page served as a mirror, reflecting both my past self and my potential with God's grace. My mother's eyes gleamed as she saw me studying with books strewn all over the table. I never thought month ago would look like this. And I didn't either. I started assisting the parish priest by being there with the people, listening to them, and praying with them in addition to doing practical duties like painting the walls or planning events. I found that a lot of individuals held guilt that was similar to mine. Guilt for quitting prayer when the answer never came, shame for rebelling, guilt for disbelieving, guilt for keeping quiet, regret for leaving God after a loss. And I said, me too. So did I. Since I now knew the identity of the Virgin Mary, I always used the pronoun she with respect. A mother never abandons her, and she is a mother. She is present but silent even when her son cries, blasphemes, and falls. I was given a unique opportunity one day to testify at a Marian retreat in a nearby town. I arrived there with a line of people eager to hear me, my notebook in hand and my heart racing. I didn't search for witty phrases, I just spoke quietly. Simply put, I hit her picture, became immobile, and didn't begin to move again until I sobbed at her feet and begged for her forgiveness. I witnessed both men's and women's eyes filling with tears. Finally, a young woman with her baby son came up to me. She told me, "Your narrative reminded me of the church when I was starting to stray away from it. I appreciate you not keeping your background a secret." I gave that woman the kind of hug one gives a living miracle, because I realized in that hug that my new purpose was to serve as a bridge between people who have fallen and those who wish to rise again, between people who are doubtful and those who simply need a little encouragement to believe again. My heart was on fire when I returned home. I attended church by myself that night. I knelt in front of the Virgin Mary figure that I had previously hit and muttered, "I appreciate you taking advantage of me despite my rejection of you. I'm grateful that you used my shame to your advantage. I appreciate you not leaving your son behind." I had an inexplicable feeling in the church's gloom. It was neither a voice nor a vision. There was a presence. I also realized that I would never be by myself again. It has been precisely 3 years since my legs failed me in front of the image of Our Lady of Sorrows. It has been 3 years since my fall and the start of my actual recuperation. I may argue that it was retribution for my cruel remarks, blasphemy, and haughtiness. But as time went on, I came to perceive it differently. It was mercy rather than punishment. God would have abandoned me in ignorance, ridicule, and emptiness if He had intended to punish me. But in order for me to find love, He let me fall. And today, I write these words for someone who could be going through what I did, not to brag about myself or impress others. Perhaps you're upset with faith. Perhaps you believe that praying is pointless. Perhaps, like me, you prayed to God for something but didn't get it. And you were internally broken. Since I was that man, I can relate. In front of a large crowd, I was the one who made fun of, left, and kicked a picture of the Virgin Mary because I believed I was strong. Looking back now, though, I see that it was only when I knelt down that I realized how strong I was. I was liberated by kneeling, not diminished. I also share today the freedom I was granted. In the eyes of those who listen, in hearts that open, even slightly, and realize that the Mother is waiting on the other side, not in opulent cathedrals or on stages. You might not be able to see her, feel her, or have any doubts about her. However, she is present. Yes, by your side right there. She doesn't turn away, not even when you ignore her, claim you don't believe, or scream at the sky. She holds off. That's what I discovered. Speaking to those in need is my mission for today, if I have one. To address those who have been harmed by religion, those who have experienced loss and have failed to comprehend, those who have been taught to despise faith, and those who have already knelt and have not received a response. I can assure you that she has heard. You might not get the answer right away. It might not go as planned, but it will happen. And everything will make sense to you when it happens. With the rosary in my pocket, her name on my lips, and the serenity that only those who have been forgiven can experience, I now go around my hamlet without feeling ashamed. People occasionally pull me over on the street. "I take it that you're Tiago, the man who struck the picture?" And I'm grinning. I am that. However, I'm also the one who resumed walking and, more significantly, fell in love once more. Because faith isn't walking with your legs, my friends. It involves following your heart's path. You've listened to this story this far because deep down you still have some semblance of faith. Even if that faith is concealed by suffering, arrogance, or exhaustion, that little bit is sufficient, I assure you. It might mark the start of your miracle. If this story resonated with you, leave a comment using the word forgiveness. If you want to see more testimonies like this one, like this video, share it with someone who needs faith and subscribe to the channel. May the shawl of Our Lady of Sorrows envelop you.